It's Lorena Bader, right? Thank you.
Good morning. Fort Paws and Friends was founded by Laura Martini and myself to provide much-needed enrichment, support, and promotion for the animals at the West Shelter. Firing me while I was actually dedicating my time and energy to forming a 501c3 to help MCACC has put them in an awkward position. However, you would hope that they would set aside their egos and pettiness and graciously accept our help and donations. Sadly, that is not the case. Every step of the way, they have attempted to prevent us from helping grown adults sitting in meetings, figuring out how to thwart our efforts. They are willing to sacrifice the mental and physical health of the animals in order to play their sick games. Here are just a few examples, most of which have backfired spectacularly. Attempting to prevent us from providing and serving Christmas dinner for the dogs. Delaying our request for a public dog walk, then changing the rules 2 days prior. Deciding that only active volunteers can pass out enrichment items that Four Paws provides. Defaming us on their Facebook page and actually lying to make it appear that we solicited funds under false pretenses. Laura Martini has repeatedly spoken to Sam Wessel and management regarding the roadblocks put up every step of the way. Our pleas fall on deaf ears. Logic, common sense, problem solving, and an ability to communicate effectively are basically non-existent with this management team. They are blinded by their need for retaliation. It must be obvious to you by now why donors, volunteers, and staff have fled MCACC and why their reputation is in tatters. This board and Maricopa County management must deal with the bullying and abuses that have been brought up time and time again. By not having consequences, the bullies are emboldened and continue their destructive practices. I will not stop speaking until injustices are rectified. Those in charge are consequated for their abuses, and staff, volunteers, and the animals are treated with the care and the respect they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. How about now, Ms. Hannigan?
Sure. Good morning.
Good morning.
Brought some props today. This is a biscuit, it's a dog biscuit, and this is a pork chomp. They're both dog treats, but in the eyes of the MCACC volunteer coordinator, Samantha Wassell, they could not be more different. In October, when our nonprofit Four Paws and Friends started providing enrichment to the shelter animals, we'd go in as members of the public and pass out different kinds of edible enrichment. As this activity has always been allowed for other nonprofits, we carried on like this for months. We did so with the approval of their on-staff enrichment coordinator. Things were going well from an enrichment standpoint until mid-January when Ms. Wassell overreached and our efforts were interfered with. We received an email stating only approved and trained volunteers were qualified to pass treats through locked kennel doors, and members of the public, i.e. fired volunteers, would not be able to do so. When confronted with logic and reminded that MCACC literally keeps biscuits in their kennel buildings for the general public to give to dogs, which seemingly would void her reason to exclude the fired volunteers, suddenly there was now a difference between biscuits and pork chops. Ms. Wassell insists distribution of these high-interest, high-value items can only be done by volunteers who are properly trained and coordinated to ensure the items are appropriately distributed, whatever that means. Keep in mind that only 6 months ago, Ms. Bader was not only a trained volunteer, but one of the most highly trained volunteers, often entrusted by the director herself with tasks that even staff couldn't accomplish. And because of our efforts, Four Paws was nationally acknowledged by the company that owns pork chomps. So, do you think it's possible that Ms. Wassell is actually worried that a fired volunteer who's not well versed in the art of passing out dog treats might accidentally dump all of the pork chomps intended for one building into a single kennel? Or is it more likely that she's wasting county's time and resources and engaging in the pettiness and retaliation we have come to expect from MCACC? Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Ms. Jordan Bader.
Morning.
Morning.
MCACC is supposed to be financially self-sustaining. Maricopa County provides little money to help MCACC, so volunteers are vital in helping the organization run well. Volunteers are in the thick of the shelter. They see everything and know everything that's going on. Suzanne Fuqua and Sam Wessel have taken over training in the volunteer program. Things have been difficult. The majority of volunteers are unhappy and they're unable to retain new volunteers. Did you know that Suzanne Fuqua was the director at Sedona Humane? Did you know that volunteers quit under her leadership and it ended up costing her the position? Why did they leave? Lack of communication, lack of respect for management and the board, lack of input, lack of what volunteers could say. Leadership was ineffectual at fixing problems. And that when Suzanne left, that's when Mary reached out and brought her in. Volunteers are not respected at MCACC. Their opinions are disregarded. They have no voice in decisions. They are shown no appreciation. Instead, they are in constant trouble for the most ridiculous things. Talking too loud around the dogs, walking too fast or running with the dog, carrying the wrong kind of bag, giving the wrong kind of treats, playing fetch with the dogs. This management team has no idea how to effectively communicate and inspire a group of people. I now go to the East Shelter one day a week and the kennels are crap, but the environment is like night and day for me. You want to know why? Because management is never around micromanaging staff and volunteers. The volunteers work with the staff. They actually have a relationship there. They are not treated like children or felt like they are not wanted. You will never have a strong volunteer program at the West Shelter if it is not managed and supported like it should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bader. Now, Ms. Erica Edmar.
Good morning. 2 weeks ago, 4 Paws and Friends received messages from 3 different shelter employees letting them know that the shelter had been out of wet dog food for days and that numerous requests to management had gone unanswered. 4 Paws put out a plea requesting donations to buy food for the West Shelter. They quickly raised over $1,000, bought 1,200 cans of food, and delivered it to the shelter before they opened. A few hours later, a post appeared on MCACC's official Facebook page slandering 4 Paws in the form of a PSA, telling people that there was a group lying about the shelter's inventory in order to solicit donations. It was later confirmed that this post was false and there was no wet food at all, especially not in the abundance the post claimed. Instead of thanking 4 Paws or simply choosing to not post anything, MCACC implied to their 50,000 followers that a nonprofit set up specifically to provide for their dogs was lying to supporters and mishandling donations. After the initial shock at such a harmful post, I thought back to how our firing was handled. I wondered how the situation would have played out if, at that time, there had been a group of people no longer afraid of speaking out against injustice and incompetence as there is now. If people didn't stay silent out of fear of losing their volunteer privileges or jobs because they made a legitimate suggestion about how the shelter could operate better. How long would the dogs have needlessly suffered in the heat, panting all day long, some actually seizing and turning blue? Prior to that day, the employees who actually cared had no one to turn to when their concerns were ignored by management. I found purpose at this shelter, and I truly miss the dogs and volunteering, but I'm happy to be one of the scapegoats sacrificed if it means that others have a place to reach out for help. I'm glad that our termination has emboldened others to speak up when they see something wrong. Honestly, I'm surprised to still be here, burning 8 hours of vacation every month to stand at this podium for 2 minutes every 2 weeks, but as long as county continues to give us things to speak about, we will come back. Between the old and new issues and others finding their voice, I imagine we will be here for a while. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also have a printout of the post that was slandering us for you guys to review. Thank you.
Great, thank you for coming today. And last, what I have here is speaker slip, Miss Kathleen Bow.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I would like to report my failing volunteer program with some numbers. To properly staff our volunteers for the number of animals to be as successful as PAC in Tucson, we need 138,000 hours for the approximate 29,000 animals who come through our shelter a year. Last year, we had 36,000 hours for approximately 1.2 hours per animal for the year. PAC in Tucson had 89,000 hours for 18,000 animals for 5 hours per animal. And the Humane Society had 408,000 for 17,000 animals for 24 hours per animal. We're about 100,000 hours short and that are available from a community of animal-loving people who would love to volunteer. By not taking advantage of this resource and using $15 an hour as the base, we're throwing approximately $1.5 million out the window. The two people running the volunteer and training programs at our shelter are rude, condescending, ineffective, and lacking in the ability to interact with people. New volunteers should not be required to spend 16 hours cleaning kennels or doing laundry unless that's what they signed up to do. Interviewing old and new volunteers would get a picture if you did it. A recent new volunteer who had 6 years of experience handling difficult dogs at MASH and prior 6 years of fostering and shelter work reported that Miss Wessel refused to accept that experience to fast-track her to work with our little dogs. She's not surprised that many volunteers just don't show up again. We can do better. Let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that was the last of the speakers. Thanks everybody for joining us.